What we've found in coaching literally thousands of people is that there are lots of things that we have an idea, like, it's about control, or it's about nutritional imbalance, or it's about, self-worth, or there are lots of things we can go back to, but that it's actually the most effective way to end that struggle is to look at the thought patterns driving this.
Welcome to the Small Steps, Big Wins podcast. I'm dedicated to helping you take control of your life. Together, we'll explore practical tips, expert advice, and inspiring stories to help you overcome obstacles and achieve your goals. Making small changes is possible and can lead to big results. Are you ready? Let's go do this. Well, Small Steps, Big Wins family, we are in for another treat today. I want to welcome you back to another episode. Today's special guest is Lydia Knight. She's founder and CEO of the She Center. She's also an award-winning executive coach and speaker where she helps leaders unlock their full potential. Lydia's journey is truly remarkable. She came to me through a mutual friend and she was on his podcast. So, of course, he sends her my way. And I'm like, of course, she has to be on my podcast. So we're going to dive into her journey. She's written 2 books. Her upcoming memoir is called Split. And she bravely shares her experience of escaping a cult, a story of resilience and the power of the human spirit. And she also has a nonfiction book called Thought Leader, which she dives into the neuroscience-backed principles that drive lasting transformation. All these things I cannot wait to dive into. So Lydia, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me on. I'm excited for our conversation, Sue, and thank you for that beautiful introduction. So I have a pretty bizarre story. A lot of my life, I didn't share it, but it's been so rewarding and beautiful and brought together such a great community with sharing it. So just a little plug for share your authentic story because it's what the world needs. And I am a cult survivor. So my grandmother was actually a cult leader. She created a cult within the Mormon church. So I also grew up Mormon, and then within the cult that my grandmother created. I grew up with a lot of absolute fear. So the story that I was told all growing up that was absolutely terrifying was that there was a group of Satan worshipers that had kidnapped me as an infant, that had put needles into my eyes, that had broken my spine over and over, that had sexually assaulted me, and I had been gang raped, and I had had all of this, what is called satanic ritualistic abuse. So in a historical context, what happened in the 80s was there was something called the Satanic Panic, where a lot of Christian churches created this story that was not based on truth at all, but created this story that there's a group of Satan worshipers and they rule the world and the government and police departments and that they're out to get our children. And so my grandmother latched onto this and essentially created it as a story and told my younger brother and I that this had happened to us. So yeah, growing up, she would sit me down on the couch next to her and she would call her first friend and she would tell them all of these really horrible, detailed, explicit descriptions of the awful things that had happened to me. And then I would be listening the whole time. She'd hang up the phone. She'd call her next friend. So growing up, this is what I heard over and over and over. And I was always running and hiding. And I grew up very terrified every single day.
Wow. But none of it was true.
None of it was true. And I didn't find that out until I was an adult. So I grew up with all the trauma and the fear of this is how the world is and this is what's happened to me. None of it was true. It was all completely made up.
That's amazing. And did your brain trick you into thinking that there were actual memories then after you heard those stories over and over again?
Great question. So they're in the Satanic Panic time, and this is sadly a story that keeps on repeating in our history of these sort of bizarre stories of these underground, Satan worshipers. It's really wild and it's hurt a lot of people's lives. But there are stories like people being hypnotized and repressed memories coming up that ended up being totally debunked, like not true at all. So I did not have that experience. I never had the memories of any of this happening. And what I was told by my cult leader grandmother and my mother, who was receiving revelations from God, apparently, about how all of the inner workings of these Satan worshipers work, that was how the cult was structured. But I was told that the reason that I didn't have these horrible memories was because my grandmother was getting all of her Mormon friends to fast, which is going without food or water, and to pray that we as children would be protected from these memories. So I was told that if I ever did anything wrong, if I ever misobeyed my family or the commandments of the Mormon church or didn't do everything perfectly, that all of this terror and these memories would come flooding back into my mind, and it would probably make me completely insane and break my brain. So that was another thing that I was just really scared of growing up and what I was told to be scared of.
Wow, wow. Did that set up in your brain like, "Oh my gosh, if I did something wrong," like, that's almost like forcing you to live a perfect life that nobody can
Yeah,
live,
the
because if you make a mistake, then you live in fear that these things are going to come back to you and that they're gonna happen to you that really didn't happen to you. Wow. So you lived in fear with that. How did you get from where you were there to where you are today? Or maybe that's too broad of a question right now. I'm not sure
Oh, we
where you
we can
wanna
totally
take
go
that.
broad strokes because this is a beautiful example of how
Yeah,
some of the very darkest things, the hardest challenges that happen to us, can end up being some of the most triumphant parts of our story when we're on
yeah,
the other side of it, or our biggest contributions. And I know that, Sue, this is so aligned with your message of,
yes,
turning that into, our dark
yeah,
times into some of the most beautiful things. So this is like
yes,
we're right
yes.
on track.
Yeah, small
So
steps to big wins because like you just
yeah.
even taking tragic events, we talked before we started. So your life is definitely a testimony to taking challenges and traumas and turning them into most meaningful contributions. So talk about what that looks like for you in your life now.
Yes. So I did end up escaping that cult, and I used the principles of neuroscience to deprogram from all of the cult programming that I had grown up with. Because even though I intellectually knew that the cult story was no longer true, my nervous system, my body was still just driven by all of that fear. And that's an important part to understand about our brains, is that our behavior is driven by like the visceral emotions that we feel much more than
Mhm.
what we intellectually knew. If we were driven by what we intellectually know, then we would know what's good for us and then do it. But how many times in our lives are we like, I know better. Why do I keep on watching myself do this thing that I know is not the best choice for me and doesn't serve me? So I use those neuroscience principles to deprogram from the cult, went on to, go to college, graduate summa cum laude, got married, had a baby, built a business, and all of these things are possible because of that. And Sue, I thought that that was just, I'm so grateful for those principles, but I thought it was like a one off way to deprogram from a cult, and I'd probably never visit those again. Well, I
Mm.
became a health coach. I grew a very large business very quickly. I became a business trainer for health coaches, trained over 400 health coaches.
Wow.
We had an organization of almost 8,000 clients, and it was a big thing, and I was supposed to be a symbol of health. On the outside, I was. What was happening behind the scenes was I developed a horrible eating disorder that I didn't even know to
Mhm.
call it that at that point. All I knew is that I would binge on food out of control, be terrified just watching myself eat all of this food that I would never. Yeah, I would be humiliated if anyone ever knew. And then I would just spend weeks trying to undo all of the damage. And I was in this horrible cycle. I tried for years everything to fix it, all the traditional methods. And I just wanted to fix it so nobody ever knew that it had happened.
Mhm.
And then I would just go back to my life and nobody would ever find
Yeah.
out. What actually happened was everything that I tried made it worse. And it was
Mm.
years that I was just suffering with this. And one day when I got to a really dark low point and I was wondering if it was even worth living, I thought, I wonder if I could use the principles of neuroscience that I used to deprogram from the cult and deprogram from my eating disorder.
Mm.
And in 1 week, I
Wow.
was completely free.
Wow.
I didn't have an eating disorder anymore. I wasn't like managing it. Like I didn't have it anymore. Like I didn't have the urges to binge.
Wow.
And my whole relationship with food changed. And I went on to use those principles. We've now coached over 9,000 clients in how to apply these principles, not only to end eating disorders, but to thrive in their lives and their communication and to deprogram from, diet culture and patriarchy and oppressive upbringings and, past
Wow.
relationships.
Mhm.
And that is what set off all this. So those are the broad strokes of
Yeah.
how I got from
Yeah.
cult survivor to what I do now.
Yeah, so that's using the deep program. Wow. So is there like a small step that you could share out of that deprogramming that could be helpful to somebody who's listening and saying, "You know what? I've got these thoughts. How can somebody start the path to help themselves to
Oh,
deprogram?"
yes. And this is one of the most rewarding paths and journeys that we can take in our entire lives because we
Mm,
live our whole world through our brains. Like that is our view of the world. Those are our patterns, is how our brain works. Like that is our interaction. So absolutely. Let's dive into a couple of things that you can start today that is going to be really important. The first is to understand that trying to change your actions is one of the most unproductive things you can do, which
mm,
I know seems so counterintuitive because we're like,
mhm,
well, I'm overeating. I just need to stop overeating. I need to change my action. I'll get a different result. Because when you look at that, it seems to make so much sense.
mhm,
But what happens is that when we try to change our actions, especially when they become habits, our brains are wired to resist change.
mhm.
So, trying to change our actions literally sets off alarms. Like it feels like danger when we're trying to make even the most positive changes in our life. So, changing our action to change our results is very unproductive. What we actually need to do is change the thought patterns that drive the actions. Because with willpower, like you can change your action for a minute, but then we feel so bad when we slide back and it's like, I was
Yeah.
doing so well and now I'm not. But when you change the foundational thought patterns that lead to the actions, then you get the outcomes that you want and you have permanent changes. So
Okay.
that's like a first understanding that's really important.
Okay, so let's stay on that diet example then. So it's not just about changing the action, but don't eat the whatever. How does somebody identify the thought pattern that goes on underneath the action?
Great question. And that's the next important thing to understand.
Okay.
So, we have a lower brain and a higher brain. Just to talk about it in simple terms, the lower brain is the part of our brain that drives that habitual thought pattern that leads to our actions. That part of our brain, that lower brain is nonverbal. Then we have our higher brain, our prefrontal cortex, if you want to get neurosciency about it. And that's the part of our brain that can actually make these changes, that can look at our thought patterns and decide to change them and successfully do it. So the key is actually to move those thought patterns from our lower brain to our higher brain so that we can examine them and start changing them. And I'll give you like a clear example of
Mhm.
this now that we've got that foundation. So let's say that you don't want to eat sugar at night. You know it's not serving you. You know it makes you lose sleep and you're waking up tired and it's not good for your health. But
Right.
every night after dinner, you just want a little something. You just want a little something sweet. And so you're arguing in your brain back and forth of like, well, oh, there's a couple of cookies left. And wouldn't it be best to just get them out of the house? Like, I'd probably do so much better if they were just out of the house.
Yeah.
So, I'm going to start tomorrow and it's going to be so good. And I'm not going to eat sugar anymore. But since I want something sweet and since I need these out of the house and since I can't live my
Yeah.
whole life without any fun, right? We
Right.
have
Right.
all of this
Yeah.
dialogue going in our head. So, as long as that's happening within our brain and we're internally looking at that, then it just goes back and forth. And what's going to happen is it's always going to reinforce the pattern we're already in. If you're
Mm,
in the pattern of eating sugar at night, your brain, even if it seems like an argument back and forth, your
mhm.
brain is actually doing that as a convincing tool to get you to stay in the same old patterns.
Gotcha.
And if you
Okay.
try to just resist and like, I don't want the sugar, then your cravings for sugar are actually going to be driven up. When it comes to food, this is even more nuanced because our bodies defend against deprivation, which is an important
Mm,
thing to understand too.
mhm,
So, in that example, we have a method called the 5 C's in our thought leader book. We outline all these specifically. This is the foundation of deprogramming. And I'll give you a bit of one that is something you can start practicing today. So, first, you notice that this dialogue is going on inside your mind, right? And you recognize the thoughts leading to the action. You're not trying to stop yourself from having the sugar. You're taking a quiet moment and you're noticing the thoughts that are driving that action. And instead of just having those thoughts cycling in your brain, you say them out loud. And here's
mm.
the magic and the fun neuroscience of this: the lower part of your brain is nonverbal. Your
Oh.
higher brain that can change habits is what's in charge of your speech. So it's this fun little neuro hack that as soon as you start saying those thoughts out loud, you're no longer having them cycle in your lower brain. You're actually
Ah.
forcing your brain to look at them through that higher brain, your prefrontal cortex, and you start feeling different about those, and your cravings start melting away, and you start being able to doubt those thoughts and see how silly they are.
Yeah.
All sorts of cool neuroscience stuff happens when you verbalize your thoughts. So that's a piece of it. The
Okay.
full reprogramming
So
process is important for long term, but that's a bit.
right. So verbalizing the thought would be, I really want to have this sugar, but I know this is not good for me, so I'm not going to go eat it. Is that what you would verbally say out loud that takes it from that lower brain to the higher brain for the
There
like
you go.
what
If
is
it's
yeah,
happening internally, you
right.
say it out loud, and now you're
Say
looking
what
at it
you
from your
don't
higher brain.
want out loud. Like you're saying, I don't want that sugar. Like you're actually verbalizing that out loud to your higher brain, right? Because
You've got it.
okay, because where I'm going with this is that our words matter. What we say matters. What we tell ourselves about ourselves, what we say about other people, what we speak out loud matters. And I have lately, like within the last year or so, really have started to capture what I say personally about myself, but then capturing what I'm saying about others as well. I mean, I used to put myself down. I used to not think very highly of myself. Like things like that. Like, oh, I'm just dumb. I just did that the wrong way, which you don't tell yourself that stuff. It doesn't, those, even if you think you're joking about it, it's really not a joke because the brain, and correct me if I'm wrong, the brain can't tell the difference between fact or fiction. So,
Exactly. That
what
is the
what
reason why you can go to an action movie and feel all excited, or a
yeah,
romance movie and like feel all like ooey gooey,
yeah,
because you're not there in the movie, but your brain
right.
really identifies with story and what's happening in the same way. And you make a great point about it's so powerful and important how we speak to ourselves. And if we're
Mhm,
saying something out loud, like, oh, I'm so dumb, if you say it out loud, you have cycled that through your lower brain 1,000 times for
mm,
that to be so solid that now you're saying it out loud.
mhm,
So it's great to catch our speech in what we're saying out loud because it allows us to know this goes a lot deeper with the
mhm.
habitual thoughts that are cycling if I'm now saying it out loud.
Wow, so share the good news with us is that if that we are telling ourselves what we shouldn't be telling ourselves, we can reprogram our brains then with what we should be saying. Yes?
Yes, absolutely. So this is such a cool process to be able to work with our brains where we can identify the thoughts that aren't serving us. We can deprogram from those. And we can choose what serves us best. So this is a
Okay.
huge part of the executive coaching we do is you literally choose your goal. Choose what life you want, choose what wealth you want to create, choose what position you want to have, and you start programming your brain with the thought patterns that align with you already having that. And it is
Mm,
incredible to see what happens with like results and identity when you just identify what brain you need to have that life. And then that life comes to pass. Like it happens for
Yeah.
real when we
Wow.
start on a brain level. Yeah, it's
Wow.
so
Example, like,
powerful.
give an example that of what that would look like.
Yes. Okay. So in our executive coaching program, we had a client that came to us. She had been, working in a job for decades, and everyone loved her because she did everyone's jobs. She did everything for everyone, and it made everyone so happy. And she was miserable and she was burnt out. And so we identified together that an important part of the results that she wanted is she wanted to be respected, she wanted to be paid more, and she wanted to love her work. So we identified the programming that wasn't serving her, deprogrammed from that. Then we identified the thought patterns that would be a match to the identity of how she wanted to feel and how she wanted to live
Wow.
within a few months. So this was probably less than a 4-month period. Here's what happened. Number one, she learned how to create boundaries because that matched with her higher thought. And it took her from being this people pleaser that everyone liked because she was doing everyone's jobs
Mm,
to her being identified as a leader, where instead people still liked her, but because she was a great leader. So all of a sudden, it wasn't everyone's jobs on her plate. People were feeling empowered to do their
mm,
own work and respecting her as a leader.
hmm.
And after being in her job for decades, she was offered a 100% salary increase.
Whoa.
That
Wow.
was the kind of value she was adding, where people saw her as the
Yeah.
leader that she literally programmed herself to be through what we were teaching her. She
Yeah.
got a 100% raise. Like
Wow.
that doesn't happen. Like people
Yeah.
are excited with a
Yeah.
little bit of a raise,
Yeah,
but
yeah, yeah.
that's the kind of quantum leap that you can have with your results when you focus on the core of what's happening, which is your thought patterns.
Wow. So you're talking about so it was changing your thoughts. Was there more to the process? I know we went kind of off on a tangent, but we started talking about making the thought go from the nonverbal to the verbal, speaking it out loud. Was there something else beyond? Like, can we do more, go further than that? Or is
Oh,
that just the pro
absolutely.
Okay, all
So,
right, let's keep going on our
yes,
journey.
yeah. So in our book Thought Leader, we outline all of the 5 C's. So
Okay.
there's a specific process because you need to reprogram and deprogram your brain, understand how to do that. You
Mhm.
also need to bring down resistance. Because remember when we talked about how change is seen as a threat to your brain? Even if
Mhm.
it's the best change in the world,
Okay.
change feels scary to our brain. So we also need to bring down that resistance where our brain is actually really excited to change and feels safe to change. So there are multiple things we want to put in place. But one thing you can start practicing today is start saying your thoughts out loud to move them to your higher brain. And another fun piece is to really think about what you want in life, like what results
Mm.
you want, like let yourself dream and then notice if your current thoughts are matching that dream, like the
Mm.
thoughts that you would have if you were in that place. And spoiler, they're not, because if they already did match that, you would already have that in your life. And so identifying that gap is a really interesting piece as well. But yeah, I mean, this is what we've done for over 9,000 clients of
Wow.
this process because it's fundamentally how we live and how we interact with the world and ourselves. It applies to anything you want to create, really.
One of the things that you say is making our greatest challenges and turning them into our most meaningful contributions. So you talked about writing the book Thought Leader. What else in your life has come out of your cult experience and been able to change and transform the lives of others?
Yes, this is so joyous because it is such a wonderful thing when you have your own journey you get to celebrate and then get to give that to others.
Hmm.
So, it I would love and thank you for asking to celebrate, in my own world and story how this has happened. But every celebration is something that we've now been able to give the world, right? It's like over 9,000 clients that we've
Yeah.
coached
Yeah.
and
Right.
it's so fun. So just know that like what I'm sharing is a reflection of I'm doing the same thing that we teach our clients. So there was the deprogramming from the cult was first, deprogramming from diet culture essentially to end the eating disorder. We are also celebrating building a organization that is in the top 2% of woman-owned businesses. And we did that
Wow.
in just a couple short years,
Talk about that.
very much with those principles. So in this process, like the deprogramming, the 5 C's that we talked about, really that's the core of what we do. So we do that with our executive coaching. We do that with these incredible 3-day immersive in-person events where we just like deprogram in like, 3 days. We're just like, let's take the thing that's holding you back and just deprogram from that and learn the whole 5 C's. Then we also have specific programs for ending, an eating disorder, for, other sorts of results that these principles are really specifically oriented to. So those are big pieces of it. And that's what we do at the She Center. And in building that, with any time that you want to start a business or an organization or make a difference in the world, the core of that is really the identity. When we talk about, money mindset or success mindset or who do you need to be to build what you want, that really comes down to what thought patterns are a match to that. So, Sue, I use this exact same principles. I had to deprogram from the poverty that I grew up in, to
Mm.
have a top 2% organization. Like, you got to
Yeah,
fix your money
wow.
mindset.
Yeah, yeah, I would think so. There's a lot more than money mindset going on there because if you think about it, to grow something that's in the top 2% of an organization, I mean, that's no small feat. That's there's a lot of small steps along the way to get you to where you are. And feel free to talk about that journey as well. Some of the challenges that you had with that. Like, did you struggle with imposter syndrome to build
Oh,
something like
all
that?
of it. I mean, we get these messages as women really strongly. And then growing up in a cult, they were even more amplified. So
Sure.
we get the message of perfectionism. But like we talked about, like perfectionism was wired into me on a survival level growing up.
Right, right.
So, absolutely, I needed to deprogram from perfectionism, from poverty, from the fear of being seen. Growing up in a cult, I was told that if I talked to the wrong people or if more people saw me, the Satan worshipers would find me and kill me that day. Like,
Wow.
and being able to be out there in the world, we've had many videos go viral. We had one that has like 4.5 million views. There's some deprogramming that needs to happen to be
Yeah.
seen in a big way and to feel safe in that. So those were some big areas, imposter syndrome, all of it. But the beautiful piece is that you look at the next thing that's in front of you, and then you look at the thought patterns that you have now and the thought patterns that you need to have to be a match to what you want. And you just rinse and repeat. It's just the
Oh, wow.
five
Okay.
C's over and over. And that's really how we built it. Like, hustle, grit, all of that comes from being able to see where you're at and then, all right, what are the skills that I need, and let's program
Yeah.
those things into our minds. So
Yeah.
yes, it was building the business, it was leaving an abusive marriage. That was also an aspect of deprogramming. Now I have a wonderful supportive relationship and have for almost a decade, and
Mm.
went from an abusive marriage to that. So
Yeah.
often we repeat the same sort of patterns in our relationships, and you can end that between one relationship and another.
Right. Right. You find yourself gravitating back towards the same thing and you're still wondering like, why am I doing that again? I thought I just left to this thing and then you went to the end. It is amazing how ingrained the into the subconscious those patterns are. Or at least what you gravitate back towards because your brain is trying to keep you safe, right? It's just trying to keep you safe.
Yeah.
But what I love about everything that I'm hearing is that we do not have to succumb to that. So I'm curious about the broader question is if you deprogram yourself from something like you talked about poverty, you talked about perfectionism, do those things pop back up again? Like, is that common? And then do you have to just deprogram yourself again? How does that work?
Great question. It's really a layering piece. So,
Okay.
for example, with the eating piece, you can deprogram from binge eating. Like, I have no urge to binge eat anymore. Like that doesn't even make sense to me. Like I just like it's not attractive anymore because I've
Mhm,
once you deprogram, there's the immediate effect of like, oh, I don't feel an urge toward this anymore. And
mhm.
then our brain does something called synaptic pruning, which it looks at old things that have fired and wired together. And if they haven't been used for a while, your brain is efficient. So it's like, we don't even need this connection. So you're actually making changes at like a physical level on your
Wow.
brain.
Wow.
Yeah. It's so
Wow,
cool.
that's oh my god, you could just deprogram from all kinds of stuff you don't want. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm sitting here thinking you could just manifest and create the life you want through deprogramming wrong thoughts, bad habits, and stacking one of them at a time. So the small step is not to change your life in every aspect, every area completely overnight, but pick that one area and continue to layer one on top of the other. And I see you want to elaborate on that,
Yeah, and
but you
so a quick little side note and then I'll come back. That is a great clue about perfectionism. When we're like, I want to change my entire life, that leads to the overwhelm of how do I do that perfectly in the next 24 hours? Well, I can't. Well, then I just won't do anything. Perfectionism is really a delay tactic that your brain uses. It's not about doing things well, it's about not doing things until you can do them perfectly, which is never. So that's a quick little
wow. Oh
offshoot.
my God. I never
But
thought of perfection. I consider myself a recovering perfectionist, but I never thought about it that way, that it actually paralyzes you into taking action. But now that I think about it, yeah, there's a lot of truth to that.
yeah, totally. So
Yeah.
we can
Wow.
nerd out on some thought patterns there, but to complete that example, like deprogramming from binge eating, like that's gone. But then the next layer is actually creating a healthy life.
Mm.
So, oh, well, how do I deprogram from the things that were holding me back from staying hydrated and getting good sleep? So, what happens is you deprogram in layers where you get out of crisis and the things that are a real problem.
Mhm.
Then you get out of you deprogram from the blocks that are holding you back from thriving. Then you deprogram to optimize your life for your very best life, for your like thriving. So
Wow.
you get to have these exciting layers, but there's always something to deprogram, but you get to have it be a more and more fun process because it turns into a celebration of this is what I get to deprogram from because I'm already through all of these old layers that aren't an issue anymore. So that's a fun part of that journey.
Wow. I hear you use the word celebration. Talk a little bit about the role celebration plays in the accomplishments that one achieves when you are, you're changing these thought patterns. What does celebration look like?
Oh, I'm so glad you caught that. Sue, that's literally one of the five C's. C is for celebration. So
I
you
did
totally
not
got
know
that.
that.
So this is a really important part of deprogramming what doesn't serve us, reprogramming, like remembering like what is our authentic self. So not that we're dogs, but just a fun example of this is a dog will do more for a good job, buddy, than it will for even like a treat. Like
Wow.
they're so motivated and as are we. Like we are very motivated by that positive reinforcement.
Sure.
But we have a brain that is very negative biased. Like if you write down your thoughts all day long, you're like, "Oh, 90% of these are like doomsday, negative, beat myself up."
Yeah.
Because the lower part of our brain, that survival part of our brain, it's efficient to just be scared of things all the time because that keeps us like alive, but it doesn't allow us to like thrive and really live our best lives. So, part of the celebration process and really giving ourselves credit for the wins and celebrating every step is a way to bring down resistance in our brain, a way for our brain to know that what we're doing is safe, and a way to reprogram our brain into being more positive. So you can go from having a brain that beats you up all day to a brain that cheers you on all day. You can intentionally do that, but you're going to get the negative brain by default because that's what
Yeah.
evolution gave you. Like that's what's come down through the generations.
Wow.
So
Wow.
celebrating is a really important piece of it. And there are specific ways you can celebrate that really amplify the neuroscience pieces of it. But
Mm.
yeah, I say celebrate because that's such a
Well,
culture in our community.
I love the word. Can you share one or two ways of celebration? Because I hear it and I'm the type of person that I will accomplish something, but I don't reward myself for the accomplishment. I just say, "Oh, yeah, that's right. I achieved that. Check. Next. What comes next?" But
Yes.
the celebration piece, I really struggle with. So you said there are a few that are very specific that can be more rewarding than others. Could you share one or two of what they would be?
Absolutely. So, in the process of celebration, this is what our brain does by default, and then I'll talk about how to change it. So, we call this the moving target phenomenon in our community because as soon as you have something to celebrate, well, you already did it. So it's normalized, and now your brain's going to look at the next thing. It's this moving target of
Mhm.
anything you accomplished, you shouldn't feel good about it because, well, you didn't accomplish the next thing. You could live your whole life just with that moving target
Yeah. Yeah.
misery.
Yeah. You're explaining me. I mean, that's what I do.
Well, like, this is a I mean, you're a human being. This
Yeah.
is what
Right.
human beings do, right? It's like that's
Yeah.
the default way that our brain works.
Okay.
So, to decide in advance what to celebrate instead of I'll wait to celebrate till I get there. So, for instance,
Okay.
if you want to create a simple habit like, drinking 100 ounces of water a day, decide in advance, I'm going to celebrate as soon as I get to 50 ounces and give yourself permission once you drink 50 ounces of water to really, and this is the important part, feel the celebration. Not like a, well, yeah, I did it, but like a, yes, yes, I am halfway to my goal. I'm allowing myself to really feel the celebration. Like,
Yeah.
get silly with it because your brain will pay attention to really you giving yourself permission
Yeah.
to
Almost
feel that
like a
celebration.
physical fist pump. Like, yeah, I got it. Like that
Yeah.
kind. Okay. It's funny because I was always stuck in this mode where when you heard the word celebration, you thought of party, you think of in my case, it used to be some kind of food treat, but you think
Mm.
of being rewarded with something physical, like a gift or a small token. So every time my brain hears celebration, I go there. And so I'm so glad that you said celebration is more of a feeling within the body that can be initiated by physical, like a fist pump or like a yeah, something verbal as opposed to something that is physical.
Oh, yeah, you
Finally
make such a great
debunks
point there.
the yeah, finally debunks the celebration end for me anyway. I don't know if anybody else benefited from that one, but certainly I did now. So I'm going to find more ways to celebrate in my little accomplishments. So Lydia, thank you for that one. You made my day.
Oh, well, good. I'm so glad that was helpful. It was helpful for you, that it's helpful for lots of people. So thank you for
Okay.
emphasizing that. Just a quick note on that is if you celebrate in a way that doesn't serve you, you probably want to change that celebration. Like
Sure.
if you don't want to eat sugar, but every time like celebration for you is having a gummy worm, like you're going to have a lot of gummy worms, like don't do a
That's
celebration
well, talk
that
about,
isn't sustainable and serving you.
yeah, you know what? Talk about contradiction in the brain. What are your thoughts on that? Because that is exactly what that's doing. Is setting up a contradiction in your brain, isn't it? And I would go so far as to say it may also be compromising your integrity. What does the science say? What are your thoughts on that?
Yes. So with celebration, you get to define that. And so many of us define celebration with how our parents taught us to celebrate or
Mhm.
whoever was the authority that gave us that reward, right? It's like when you're a kid, oftentimes you're given candy or you're given some little toy. And then we're like grown adults and we're like, well, to celebrate, I guess I need a little candy. Like, we get to define what celebration is, and
The
we
toys
also
just
get
get
to
bigger.
know. Yeah. Yeah, the toys get bigger, right?
They
It's
get
like,
more
well, I used to get
expensive.
myself, a little toy car, and now I get myself like a real car. It was like, well, we wanna look at that. So
So
there's the power and agency of deciding how we celebrate. And then there's the neuroscience behind it, which is the most effective thing is the way that we feel. As women, we are really taught to like almost negative associations with celebration of like, oh, well,
mhm.
don't make someone else feel bad or don't get too excited. The other shoe might drop or, oh, well, don't celebrate. Like you don't want to be, prideful or,
Right.
brag. It's like, well, the feeling is the most important thing. Our brains rewire in a much more efficient way with the feeling. So if a chocolate covered almond gives you that feeling, okay, maybe that serves you, but you can also just decide to let yourself feel.
Wow. It's not just the physical sensation, but there's also the mental, the feeling behind it. And what I hear you saying is that you can reproduce feeling into the feeling as opposed to actually having to have the physical thing to get the feeling. Yes? There we
100%.
go.
And
Okay.
what fires together wires together. So, what
Okay.
starts happening is when you practice emotions that serve you and help you rewire your brain, that starts becoming a habit. It starts
Mhm.
becoming something that's automatic and really serving you. So, it like all of the great ways that this works and how it helps you start stacking up in a really positive way.
Mhm.
So, yes.
Wow. What are your thoughts on the role of meditation in rewiring the brain?
Oh, yes, that's really important. So, with meditation, first of all, I just want to, for anyone who feels like emotionally triggered by this word of like, oh, I'm not good at it, or I can't do that, or I can't sit still. I just want to quickly define that meditation is just a training your brain to come back to what you decided versus your brain just doing the thing that it's going to do by
Mm.
default. So,
Okay.
so you can meditate while you're driving because you're just coming back to your breath or whatever, and you can still safely drive, like an example of that. So, what's really beneficial about meditation is that it changes your brain overall
Mm.
to be more flexible. So your brain rewires better when you have a practice of meditation. So it's a great way to strengthen your brain. You don't need to be good at meditation to deprogram and to do the 5 C's, but it's a great way to strengthen your brain. So it makes everything smoother and easier. It
Mm.
also helps your brain to feel more safe. So when we have a practice of meditation, instead of the reacting all day long and sort of everything is, emotionally triggering us, we are in more of like a calm state, and it creates more happiness, which is also just a nicer way to live
Sure.
and a beautiful sustaining thing long term in that meditation. And then the other
Mm.
thing that meditation does is that it gives us a practice and empowerment over our own state. So it gives us this practice and belief of, oh, I can choose to be calm in this moment. I can choose to
Ah.
come back and be centered and to trust that process versus feeling very out of control in our own internal environment, which is a hard way to live. So it
Sure.
improves our life in multiple ways. And the real key piece is it strengthens our brain and allows us to do what we want to do easier.
Okay, so what are some practical small steps for beginning meditations?
First, let's look at the default programming around meditation. So the programming would say, well, if I'm going to do it, then I need to do it perfectly. And today's not a good day. So I'll probably start Monday. Monday's a good time to start. I probably need to find the perfect app, and I probably need to set boundaries with my entire family so that nobody
I'm
bothers me.
laughing. I'm laughing
And
because I've had that dialogue. Yeah. Okay.
totally. And I need to set aside an hour and a half, and I probably need to
Yeah.
read 5 books before I get there because I don't
Yeah.
really
Yeah.
understand it. It's going to be so embarrassing if I start and then I fall off the wagon with that, especially when it's so important. So this is the programming that our brain automatically brings up because what it's going to do is it's going to stop you from starting.
Right.
That's what your brain is actually doing because all of that feels overwhelming.
Yeah.
So a great way to start meditation is choose a step that feels so ridiculously, insanely easy, that would be such an easy win that it's almost laughable. Like, I'm going to meditate by right now, as I'm listening to this podcast, taking 2 deep breaths. And then I'm going to celebrate that I took my 2 deep breaths. Because here's the thing is when you can give yourself a win, when you can give yourself something to celebrate, it's much more about reinforcing the habit of
Mm.
meditation rather than doing it perfectly someday.
Yeah.
Starting with breathing is great. Starting with taking a 2 minute break in your day to just
Mm.
get quiet or walk outside is great. It's essentially setting aside a time or a space or an action where your brain is, you're practicing being in an intentional state with your brain versus it being on default.
And we came right back to the celebration as well. What is one thing that you thought would be hard about reprogramming your thoughts but wasn't? And then what was one thing that you thought would be easier but turned out to be more challenging?
Yes. So something that I thought would be hard that ended up being easy once I found what worked was ending my eating disorder.
Mm.
Like the process of deprogramming is phenomenally easier than
Mhm.
taking 40 hours a week and tracking every emotion and tracking all your
Wow.
calories and, going to meetings every week and reading tons and tons of books and beating yourself up and withholding all these foods. Like I was I was working more than full time, and then I was working more than full time ending my eating disorder on top of that. And it
Wow.
it was so hard until I realized the principles of deprogramming, and it ended up the things that took so long, years, the solution once I found it was really so simple,
Wow.
so simple. So that was something that surprised me. It's like, oh,
Yeah.
you can deprogram because the traditional thinking around eating disorders, like people will kind of get mad at you if you're like, actually, you can just you can be done in a couple weeks once you know a relationship with your brain. I mean, that's
Yeah.
true, but it's something that is built up to be an impossible thing to overcome. So that was definitely a piece that I thought would be really hard that ended up being easier. And then the other way around. So I'll just be vulnerable and share something like right now that we're moving through that we thought would be so easy that has ended up being very challenging. So specifically with our program Empower about ending eating disorders, it's a huge problem. UNC Chapel Hill did a study where they found that 3 out of 4 women struggle with disordered eating. It is a massive problem. 75% of women in the world are looking for a solution for that right now.
Mhm.
And we thought because we have the most effective method in the world of fixing that problem, that it would be easy to find the women that needed it
Mhm.
and to get that message to them so that we can obliterate this problem. It's a needless problem.
Yeah.
And what we've actually found really challenging is around the time that these weight loss drugs like Ozempic, what we found is that social media across the board started banning and censoring being able to talk about eating disorders at all.
Wow.
So if you say binge eating on an Instagram video, you can get your account shut down.
Oh, wow. I did not know that.
Yeah, we had account shut down. We were doing like paid advertising
Wow.
to even reach the right people. They shut down our ads account. It has been so thank you for being here and doing what you're doing and amplifying this
Wow.
message. And please, like, tell the women in your life if you're listening and know those who
Yeah.
are struggling, because it has been so hard for us to
Huh.
even have people know there's a solution because we
Yeah.
can't talk about it.
Yeah. Yeah. You can't talk, but yet you can watch the TV commercial, push the drugs. Well, that's just a band-aid for the problem. If you're overweight, there's an underlying issue there that's causing that in the first place, whether it's a medical, whether it's a emotional issue. It's not addressing what's happening underneath. It's just a band-aid for the deeper problem. And here you are
Absolutely.
trying to offer a solution for the deeper problem through neuroprogramming, and you can't even talk about it. How frustrating is that? That's gotta be
Yeah,
frustrating.
it's been rough,
Yeah.
and so that's
Wow.
something we thought, "Oh, easiest thing in the world, one of the biggest problems in the world, and
Yeah.
we have a
Yeah.
solution," and
And
it's been
it's
so
generational too.
challenging.
What I struggle with disordered eating for over a decade, and I found it's a control issue for me. When things in my life I feel like they're running out of control, then the control over the eating comes back in. But I think the one thing for me that brought it to my attention that made me realize, hey, I got to pause here on what it is that I'm doing is when I started to see it in my kids. And this was
Mm,
I'm going back quite a while. All my kids are adults now, so I'm going back probably about 10, 15 years maybe. And I struggled for 10 to 15 years prior to that, but it was that turning point where it showed up at one point. I don't exactly remember when, but I realized it was being passed on to them. And so I say that because if there's 75% of those women out there They're struggling, but then there's other people watching them struggle, picking up these habits and these thought processes as well. So,
Absolutely. And
yeah.
I'll speak a couple things into that. One, I just thank you for sharing and I honor your journey in that and huge celebration for how far you've come. So
Thank
way
you.
to go there. And what we've found in coaching literally thousands of people is that there are lots of things that we have an idea like, it's about control or it's about nutritional imbalance or it's about, self-worth, or there are lots of things we can go back to,
Mhm.
but that it's actually the most effective way to end that struggle is to look at the thought patterns driving
Right.
this.
Right.
So many women come to us and they're like, well, it's a control issue. They don't have any more control in their lives, but now they don't have an eating disorder because they looked at the thought patterns that were driving that. So
Yeah, I
that's
never
one
even
piece.
thought about that. I never thought about the thought patterns, so now I've got something else to take a look at and dig a little deeper into in a good way. In a good way, because at the end of the day, I don't wanna struggle with it either. So I'm excited about our conversation. I'm thankful for it. So
Oh no, absolutely. Like these are great things to look at. And the other piece to that is one thing that I think is really important in the deprogramming from diet culture is the deprogram from patriarchy as well. Because something that we're taught as women is that you suffering is fine, but if other people are being affected, well, now it's something you need to address. And what I would
mm,
love for the world is that women look at what they're struggling with and they feel a worthiness to fix this problem and to have a better life, even if
mm,
it's not impacting your kids or anyone else. That's a
mhm,
beautiful motivation if it's there. But
sure.
just know you are worthy right now, even if it's not impacting someone else.
Wow. Wow. Lydia, I have thoroughly enjoyed our conversation. I feel like there's so much more to talk about. And that we could just keep going on for another hour. So, you know what that means. You just have to come back on the podcast and we'll continue the conversation. So, as we close, what is one small step that someone can do today that's going to help them change their tomorrow?
Oh, I love that. Our brains respond to action. So the thought patterns drive the action, but the action that we intentionally take sends a message to our brain about what you really care about. It's like you always believe people's actions more than their words, right? And we always believe our own actions more than our own words. So a beautiful step that you can take today is decide on something that you've been putting off or decide a direction that you want to go. And before your head hits the pillow tonight, like take action on that. Like do one small thing that you can celebrate. Allow yourself to feel that celebration and allow yourself to take that action. And we've got some great, ways that you can do that as well. But whatever that is in your life, like take that action today in a way that you can complete before the end of the day and celebrate.
Oh, perfect. I love it. Lydia, how can people find you?
Yes. And oh, absolutely. So here's how you can find us, but this can also be your action for the day. So you can go to theshecenter.org/podcast. We have a free community that you can join. We have incredible information about our upcoming deprogram event where you can learn the 5 C's in person here in Santa Fe. It's going to be very fun with our upcoming one. And you can, get access to the books upcoming. So there's great things for you there, but allow yourself to celebrate when you type that into your internet browser and actually go there, because you're going from a place of listening to a place of action. You're going from consuming to creating. So when you go in, you type in theshecenter.org/podcast, you'll land on that page and allow yourself to celebrate as soon as you get to that page.
Lydia, thank you so much for sharing your amazing story and allowing that to encourage us to realize that even out of tragedy, we can triumph and we can flourish. So, thank you so much for the gift of your time. I am so grateful.
It has been wonderful. What a fun conversation. Thank you for putting such a positive message out into the world. Appreciate you, Sue.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to another episode of the Small Steps, Big Wins podcast. I value your time with me and I seek to make every moment count.
In order to make lasting change in your life, listening is usually not enough. So I want to ask you, what practical steps are you going to put into action today as a result of listening to this podcast? Remember, any step, any action, no matter how small, starts your journey to a big win. And if you're not sure where to get started, reach out to me and let's have a conversation. Until next time, love yourself, then love others. Peace.